The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is already day 3 of this 8-day sesshin, Rohatsu sesshin at Mountain Gate in December 2020. And we will continue, as is tradition, with sharing at the beginning of Teisho, Hakuin's Rohatsu exhortations. Hakuin was quite a guy. So, on the third night, the master said, there are 2 kinds of bodhisattvas, those who pass on the Dharma lamp, transmitting the eye and treasure of the Buddha's right Dharma from master-disciple without deviation, and those who preserve and protect that Dharma. The relation between them is like that which exists between teacher and a student. When a complete accord does not exist between teacher and student, the great Dharma cannot on its own come into play. When that happens, protecting the Dharma is, of course, of greatest importance. And unfortunately, we have seen sometimes in modern Zen in America where the teacher-student situation has not been optimal. I think hopefully the time has passed for those things to take place. At least 2 of the protagonists who were at issue are no longer alive. And I think Buddhist students have got a greater sense of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Long ago, the great Shingon priest Kukai asked Dainichi, the great Sun Buddha, who is foremost in protecting the Dharma? None can compare with Benzai Ten, replied the Buddha. Although transmitting the Dharma is of primary concern, the Dharma cannot function alone without the means of protecting it. Hence, the supremacy given to protectors of the Dharma like Benzai Ten. The way of Zazen comprehends all other ways. In the way of the gods, for example, the body is regarded as the condensation of heaven and earth as the expansion of the body and mind. Residing within you are 7 generations of celestial gods, 5 earth gods, and 8 million various other gods as well. This is, of course, the traditional Japanese view. According to the Shinto writings, to venerate these gods, you must perform the divine worship of the excellent ancestors. The only way to perform this worship is by practicing Zazen. When you straighten your backbone, fill your cinnabar field, that is your hara, with vital energy and sit with your 6 roots still and quiet, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. Those are the 6 roots. Not a single thought impinging on your perceptions, you are worshiping all the gods of heaven and earth. Even though you sit like this for only a single stick of incense, the merit of that sitting is by no means a small one. Zen Master Dogen said, a day of religious practice is a priceless treasure. 100 years without that practice are 100 years of regret. Ah, how awesome, how humbling those words are. So one more go at it. On the third night, the master said, there are 2 kinds of bodhisattvas, those who pass on the Dharma lamp, transmitting the eye and treasure of the Buddha's right Dharma from master to disciple without deviation, and those who preserve and protect that Dharma. So, not only that, there are those who help support and maintain the possibility of practice. In that sense, that is also protecting the Dharma. Not everybody has the karma to practice Zen, and yet there are many people who are of a mind to help support those who are. And this has been going on for millennia, really. And the fact that the Buddha himself and his followers in ancient India could go on takohatsu, could go on alms rounds, it's called in English when it's referring to that era, or to the Theravadan system, or going on takohatsu when we're talking about the Japanese system. In other words, going and offering the Dharma, offering the teaching, and offering the humility of the practitioners to inspire people to help support them in their practice for the benefit of all beings. And of course, it does come down to that bodhisattva set of vows, and to bodhicitta, to come to the benefit of all beings, to come to awakening for the benefit of all beings. It would be very hard to practice with concentration, the sort that we can do here in sesshin, if there weren't some level of support for us. We have this beautiful little zendo. We have finally, after almost 25 years of working at it, and gradually building a little bit more to accommodate the needs of people who want to practice here. We have a beautiful center, a beautiful temple as well. It's not huge. It doesn't need to be huge. It's just right for us. And that came forth as a result of the generosity of so many people. Some people are both supporting and the training bodhisattvas. And that's more or less how a lot of it is in America. Those of us who yearn to train, most of people are lay people and have jobs and have incomes as a result. And the sharing of that money to help support all of us practicing is a tremendous gift, tremendous gift. It makes it possible for all of us to be here right now, practicing together. It makes it possible for us to be doing Zoom, so that all of you who are remote are able to practice together with all of us, all three of us here in the Zendo. And together we have a wondrous Sangha, and each of us can go deeper as a result of sharing the practice with each other. It makes a difference. And of course, if it weren't for the people who have practiced over the centuries to the depth where they can pass on the teaching at significant depth, the Dharma wouldn't maintain, it wouldn't survive. And therefore, it wouldn't be possible for all of us to be practicing right now. So people doing the practice and people supporting the practice, both are essential for the Dharma to continue. And why do we want it to continue? Because it is incredible what it offers. The freedom from greed, anger, and delusion, little by little increasing freedom from greed, anger, and delusion as we go more deeply into our practice, benefits countless beings. It's not limited to people who do Zazen. All beings benefit from our practice. The more we let go, the more we let down the burdens of attempting to be a particular narrow person, the more that offers a level of freedom and ease and peace into the world. Peace comes forth from within ourselves. It can't be really applied, although many people try to. It comes from letting go enough that we are willing to see the other guy's point of view, where we are willing to be generous, kind, understanding, and help support all of us. To let go any need to fight, to be unpleasant, to be nasty, to be selfish. We're all working on moving away from those habit patterns. Long ago, the great Shingon priest Kukai asked Dainichi, the great Sun Buddha, who is foremost in protecting the Dharma? None can compare with Benzai Ten, replied the Buddha. And that, of course, again, is that speaks of Japanese Zen and Japanese culture and ancient Japanese religion, actually. Although transmitting the Dharma is a primary concern, the Dharma cannot function alone without the means of protecting it. Hence, the supremacy given to protectors of the Dharma like Benzai Ten. The way of Zazen comprehends all other ways. And that is something that is worth recognizing, although I think all of you probably do recognize it, that Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and all the other religions all point to a profound source that is, although named differently, it is the same source. And this is why at Mountain Gate we have slightly retranslated the vow of the Buddha. And the Bodhisattva vows, sentient beings are numberless, I vow to liberate them. And clinging is inexhaustible, I vow to put an end to it. The dharmas are boundless, I vow to master them. The way of liberation, and in Japanese, it is the Buddha way. But the Buddha way is not the most supreme way, necessarily. One advantage Buddhism has, Zen Buddhism at least, is that it teaches through experience handed down through generations. And in Rinzai Zen, this demands the experience of awakening to some level, at least. We may have to go away to get to the Buddha's great awakening. It may take lifetimes, but there's certainly Kensho that we are able to open to. And many of you have already experienced some level of that, which of course is a beginning, and it's important to continue onward and deeper and expand that initial Kensho, or seeing into the nature of reality, so that the seeing becomes deeper and deeper and deeper and broader and broader and broader. And as part of that, we become freer and freer and freer. Now, what instigated this change from the Buddha way is unsurpassable to the way of liberation is unsurpassable, is that many years ago at Hidden Valley Zen Center, a woman came, brought her 17-year-old son because he was filled with anxiety, and she was hoping that we could teach him how to do Zazen and he would be able to work at it and relieve his anxiety. In speaking with this woman, I discovered that she'd been raised Roman Catholic, And when she was 6 years old and undergoing her first communion, she had what I am convinced was a Kensho experience. And so it's certainly not limited to Buddhism to have Kensho experiences. Flora Courtois had a Kensho experience without ever having heard of Buddhism. And of course, then we have Ramana Maharshi in India. Same thing. Well, he probably had heard of Buddhism, but not necessarily, because Buddhism was not primary in his era. It is coming back now to India, but for a long time it was largely gone. And Jacques Lasserre in Buchenwald, who also, I'm sure, had not heard of Buddhism. It's not limited to Buddhism to have a Kensho experience. All it takes is searching deeply within for a truth that is beyond words and beyond religions and is liberating. And it's not a thing. That's why it can liberate you. So, of course, we're hearing Hakuin's words, who is in 18th century Japan and speaking out of his culture. The only way to perform this worship is by practicing Zazen, by questioning beyond words. We don't necessarily have to use the form of Zazen, but that has been shown to be quite effective over many, many years, centuries really. And so why not? If there's a way to be more effective in our practice, then why not use it? Zen Master Dogen said, "A day of religious practice is a priceless treasure. 100 years without practice are 100 years of regret." Ah, how awesome, how humbling these words are. And now I'd like to share with you a little bit more of Hakuin. This is from this amazing book, another translation by Norman Waddell, Poison Blossoms from a Thicket of Thorns. That was the title that Hakuin gave to it. Japanese Buddhist titles are kind of interesting, very colorful. And again, this was translated by Norman Waddell. And I'd like to share with you a story that Hakuin has told many, many times because it's so impressive. I think it impressed Hakuin, but it also is an example that we can use perhaps as inspiration. It refers to a layperson, a layman who lived in the village of Ohara in Japan, where Hakuin's temple was. And eventually, actually, he lived in a different village now that I think of it. He ended up becoming a student of Hakuin's because of an experience that he had, that the priest in his own village, which was not that far away, said, I don't know what happened to you because I've never experienced it myself. So why don't you go see Hakuin? He can probably tell you about it. And here it is. Living in Ihara, in Suraga, Mr. Yamanashi Harushige doesn't read or recite sutras, much less engage in Zen practice. But for the past 6 years, he's been performing hidden charity, taking care of the sick and elderly, and doing what he can to relieve their suffering. This is called hidden virtue also. Just doing things quietly without any means of identification, and no need to say, oh, well, I'm doing this. just doing it out of your own generosity, out of your own care, and doing it anonymously, so that nothing really comes back to you in terms of any praise or any or becoming famous or anything like that. Hidden virtue. And of course, we have to be careful practicing hidden virtue that we ourselves could kind of get a big head about it, whether or not it's a public event. So living in Ihara in Suruga, Mr. Yamanashi Harushige doesn't read or write or recite sutras, much less engage in Zen practice. But for the past 6 years, he has been performing hidden charity, taking care of the sick and elderly, and doing what he can to relieve their suffering. As he was visiting a friend's residence one day, he heard someone reading out a passage from a book, quote, "If a man desires to master the Buddha way, he must above all achieve Kensho. Kensho is attained by the uninterrupted application of concentrated effort. If you practice with undivided effort, Kensho will surely come. For ancient beings with great courage, Buddhahood comes in an instant of thought. For sentient beings who are lax and indolent, nirvana will not come even after endless kalpas." And that was the quote. We have to be a little bit careful about reading Hakuin, because he was kind of a bombastic personality, a very determined human being, and his determination actually stood it in good stead. However, it also got him in trouble. Early on in his years, he would focus with such overt determination that he actually made himself sick. He managed to effect a Kensho, but at a significant cost of developing a great deal of bodily attention and basically bringing him close to a nervous breakdown. It wasn't until he figured out a way, which he attributed to the mountain hermit who lived 300 years before Hakuin did, that he had to, in the Eastern way of medical thinking, bring his energy down. And that's why in Rinzai Zen, there is this focus on hara, on grounding yourself in your belly, because it's important. Otherwise, we can develop a tremendous amount of upper body tension, and that does not help our practice. To force ourselves to practice is not effective. Rather, to sink deep down into the yearning to become free. This brings forth effective practice. So Hakuin, for a long time, spoke of clenching his teeth and having his fingernails dig into his palms and so on and so forth in his efforts to come to awakening. But that kind of overt striving is not only not healthy, it's not helpful either, but rather to, like Einstein, sit down and let our mind sink deep without thinking about things, with that openness to possibility. And of course, using the extended out breath gently to help with that focus, help with letting go thoughts, help with bringing our awareness to the present moment, which is really the only thing there is. And yet we human beings tend to live in the past and the future, neither of which exist. These words filled Yamanashi with joy. He plucked up his courage, saying, If this is what the practice of the way entails, I see no reason why I can't rouse myself up and have a go at it myself. Returning to his home, he shut himself up in a room, clenched his teeth, and here's old Hakuin, and began to sit in an utterly motionless state. He battled constantly against intruding thoughts, refusing adamantly to submit to them. His entire body was drenched in nervous sweat. That night, before the 5th watch, which is between 3 and 5 a.m., he gave up his life and perished into the great death. When dawn came and he gradually returned to his senses, he got up and immediately set out for my temple. When he arrived and knocked at my gate, I ushered him in and tested him with several koan stories. He passed through them all without the least hesitation. Reading through the old Zen histories, it's rare indeed to find a story such as this one. The Japanese book Yamanashi heard being recited was the Dharma words of priest Takusui. Deeply conscious of the debt he owed Master Takusui, Yamanashi traveled to Jigen On in Edo. Jigen On is a little temple, where he obtained a Chinso portrait of Takusui. Mounting the painting himself, he brought it to me and asked me to write some words on it. I felt so happy for him that I could not refuse. I ended up summarizing his story and inscribing it over the painting. Yamanashi had often asked me for a Dharma name, but for a long time I didn't give much thought to his request. Now I've decided to give him the Dharma name Ryotetsu, which means completely penetrated. And the lay sobriquet Ji-un, which translates as compassionate cloud, Ji being compassion, Un being cloud. I hope that a relentless determination arises in him that will inspire him to undertake the great bodhisattva practice and enable him to perfect the seed of Buddha wisdom together with all other beings throughout the Dharma universe. So again, and it's interesting, Hakuin told Yamanashi's story many times in various different versions, by the way. He is the man that you have heard about, and I believe you'll hear about it later in his Rohatsu exhortations as well, that was asked to donate money to provide a statue of Fudo, the immovable one, for the village that he was living in. And when he did that, he did provide the money, and the statue was created. And he was, of course, seated in the place of honor at the ceremony of the dedication of the statue. And it was right beside a waterfall. And he had noted that the water was splashing down the waterfall. It must have been a very beautiful place. And it would form bubbles at the bottom in the pool. And those bubbles would float at different rates of speed and different distances before they would pop. And he saw that some would pop immediately and some would go a little bit down the creek and pop, and others would go a little further and pop, but they all were going to pop. And that somehow registered on him as the fact that everything is temporary. Things come and go as the karma to create them arises, and the karma to end them comes forth as well. And he realized that that was going to happen to him too, that he was going to die as well. And that's when he went home and shut himself into the guest bathroom. He was a wealthy man, as you can guess, and had enough of a house that he had a guest bathroom, and sat down to do zazen. And he had no instruction in it, but the determination was there. Now, determination, of course, is one of the 3 pillars of Zen. Faith is another. And doubt, which is kind of a funny way to put it, but it's more like a perplexity. It's like what the Buddha experienced. I'm born. I could get sick. I could get old, and I'm definitely going to die. And that's all? That's all that life is about? Nothing more? And that caused the Buddha to leave his environment and go into the forest to take up spiritual practice of the day. And eventually to realize that doing ascetic practice was not going to bring him his answers. And of course, then he abandoned the ascetic practice, went ahead and took some nourishment, which in that particular case happened to be the rice washing water, which is appropriate when you've been fasting that seriously. You can't just suddenly start eating a meal, or you will get quite ill. And the rice washing water, the rice water, was just enough nourishment to help get him back on his feet. And of course, then he was eating from then on. But he determined to search within, because he realized that searching from outside or searching outwardly was not going to bring him his answers. And the only response was to search within. And at some level, each of us has recognized that as well. All of you who are listening to this Teisho have been practicing for many years, and you would not have stuck it out if you didn't have the faith that there was something that you could realize that would be very much worth realizing, and that you could only realize it really by going within. And going within really means going beneath the level of thought, going into our body, being curious, exploring our mind, not battling the thoughts, as Hakuin put it, but becoming aware that we are thinking when we are thinking, but to allow them to be received simply like weather, clouds floating by in the sky. And we have more important work. And so we're not as interested in the clouds floating by in the sky as we are in exploring inwardly. And that is what is going to bring us to that freedom that we sense can be had. And it can be had. And countless human beings, since the day of the Buddha, have experienced deeper and deeper levels of that freedom and being able to live their lives, no matter what the circumstances, in a, as it said, a samadhi of innocent delight. The full expression is to traverse the 6 realms, to travel through the 6 realms in a samadhi of innocent delight. A metaphor for, we have all kinds of experiences, positive and negative. We have all kinds of mind states, positive and negative. But deep down, there's a centeredness and ease, a profound okayness, an underlying peace, regardless of what's going on outside. And this is so important right now when the whole world is in turmoil and where we are in danger of dying at any minute. We're always in danger of dying at any minute. I think of the man I met, young man I met at the Rochester Zen Center, who came for a training period there many, many years ago. And he was a climber, a mountain climber. And he had fallen so seriously that he told me he had to hold his head together to walk back to his base camp. When his wife learned that he had fallen, she started to run. She tripped over a log and hit her head and died. So there he was, alive despite a major fall. And of course, he survived because I met him several years later. But his wife had died in an instant. People slip and fall in the bathtub, or get hit by a car, or have a heart attack. There was a young man who I was doing personal training with when the COVID shut down the gym. But just before that, he had had some heart issues that ramped up when he did exert himself. And I don't know what eventually happened to him, but he's no longer there. And I suspect that he's not able to do the kind of exercise that he was doing and still stay alive. And this is not an uncommon situation where star athletes, and he was a baseball player that was well enough known to actually play in Italy. And yet he was still in his 20s, I believe. There are oddities of the heart. There was many situations where someone will suddenly drop dead, and it'll be found later on that there was some genetic malformation somewhere in their body that led to it. And or my friend Cindy Powelson, who was the youngest person in the whole world at age 36 back then, who died of stomach cancer. And then when I mentioned this to my brother, he said, well, she's not anymore, because somebody in his town, and he was a doctor, had died in their 20s of it. And he told me about a young guy, 19-year-old guy in his town, who died of mouth cancer as a result of chewing tobacco. We don't know what might happen to us. It's incredibly fortunate that we are alive and functioning and able to practice and to take advantage of that. But again, this is not about a striving practice. This is about a sinking deep down within and opening to possibility. And little by little, the truth will be revealed. And little by little, this tenacious self-image that keeps us trapped in the grip of having to be a certain person weakens, and who we really are begins to blossom and be revealed. And who that is humble and increasingly free to express spontaneously the innate compassion and wisdom that each one of us has in abundance. And we can access this through this amazing Zen practice that we have. And of course, the more deeply we go in it, which takes time and persistence. That's why determination is one of the 3 pillars of Zen. And I might say stubbornness is a better way to put it. But at any rate, determination to stick it out to the very end, to not stick our fingernails into our palms or clench our teeth or anything like that. It's a much more gentle practice to be truly effective and not to do damage, for that matter. And yet it works. It works, but it requires persistence. It requires determination. It requires focus. It requires effort. An effort to really question our perceptions, our thoughts, our assumptions, and to seek the underlying truth that is always true, as Flora Catra was searching for as she had finally her very deep awakening experience. So we have 4 more days, almost 5 more days, in which to continue this incredible work. If it's difficult, it is only because we perceive it that way. In reality, our being born is a search for awakening. And we can realize it. And all that we go through as part of this practice helps to liberate us. There is nothing wasted. Just keep plugging away. Just keep wordlessly questioning. Just keep bringing yourself to increasing awareness, and it will make all the difference in the world for you. So I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.